Muy bien. Tengo el tremendo honor de presentar a Dembitzer, quien casi durante medio siglo ha contribuido al desarrollo económico y social de las naciones del tercer mundo. Benny, como ustedes ya supieron, nos conocimos en Cambridge, en el Encuentros de 2010 en Inglaterra. Él es de padre polaco y madre rusa. Nació en Holanda y pasó toda su infancia en ese país. Luego fue nacionalizado británico cuando era profesor de la Universidad de Cambridge, en Inglaterra, y le tocó, por instrucción del máster del college donde él trabajaba, hacerle clases de economía a Prince Charles. No podía no enseñarle a un británico en esa época, entonces lo convirtieron en británico en 2 semanas. Lamentablemente, o quién sabe, nunca le tocó enseñarle a Prince Charles porque Prince Charles decidió tomar otras otras asignaturas. Luego de eso, se radicó en Londres para formar parte del equipo del Economist Intelligence Unit y trabajó por 4 años ahí. A principios de los 70 asume el control y el liderazgo de la organización que apunta a defender, concientizar al planeta sobre el riesgo del SIDA en las Naciones Unidas. Adicionalmente, Benny es conocido por otra cosa. Él fue parte de la organización que lideró el desarme nuclear para la Guerra Fría. Esta organización fue guiada por él y se ganó el Premio Nobel en el año 1985 de la paz. Él siempre dice que él no es un Nobel, pero todos le asignan gran responsabilidad en esas negociaciones y en el argumento racional, clínico y económico que no hacía ni un sentido acumularse con armas que con una mataban al planeta completo y menos tener cientos de múltiplos de posibilidades de destrucción entre nosotros mismos. Desde ese momento en adelante, Benny se ha dedicado a estudiar países en vías de desarrollo y problemáticas que él las llama problemáticas olvidadas, es decir, regiones, pueblos, personas, situaciones, problemas que nadie ve o que nadie de los importantes ve. Benny va a hacer su charla en inglés y nos va a conversar sin láminas y cosas sofisticadas como la vieja escuela de los profesores de Cambridge. Los dejo con ustedes con el Dr. Benny Dembitzer.
Perdóname que no hablo castellano, pero entiendo y hablo italiano y puedo entender un poquito de español. So, muchas gracias del invito. Thank you very much for referring to me as Benny. I feel at home, I feel with friends, and I'm delighted to enjoy the informality of this meeting. But I will talk very much to the contrary of what has gone before and what perhaps you were expecting. It took 4 years for Encuentros to recover from my last intervention. I hope it won't take you as long, or perhaps might take you longer. But above all, I wanted to say that I was given the opportunity to think aloud and to share some concerns with you. My concerns arise, as has been said just now, because of what I've been concentrating in studying in the last few years, and my privilege of not being in any institution that would receive me has made me very, very free. You remember Marx, I don't mean Karl Marx, a man called Groucho Marx, a comedian who said, I would never join any institution that would be prepared to have me as a member. I am exactly that. I would like to start by saying that in my view, a lot of what is going wrong in the world at present is simply dictated by a misunderstanding that the whole world believes there is one economic system that links us all and that is common to us all. There is no such a thing. It's a myth. It's a myth that has been propagated by a number of interests that believe that it is easier to run the world, whatever that may be, by using certain principles and certain guidance that emanates from the rich world, from the OECD. Now, I know that Chile is not a poor country, but Chile's interests are not the same as those of the United States or the United Kingdom. And I do know that China has also got different priorities. And in my analysis, and perhaps you will not share, but it will be, the subject, I hope, for discussion today and the next couple of days, and I intend to stay with you because I intend to learn. You will agree with me that there are at least 4 groups. There may be 4, there may be more, but at least 4 economic groups with their own priorities. Group 1, quite clearly, the OECD world, which strives and depends on credit which is granted to us by China. It's not our money. It's China that is underwriting the economies of the West, of the rich world. There is a second group, of which China certainly belongs, the BRICS: Brazil, Russia, India, China. Huge countries with enormous reserves, badly governed, by my standards, perhaps by your standards not, but with certainly very, very different economic priorities. There is a third group that is represented primarily by the oil-rich countries. They go about it in a totally different way. They're buying the West for a start. You mention any place that you care to mention in New York or in London, it is owned by the Qatar Development Group, by the Abu Dhabi, by Saudi Arabia, whatever. They don't have to obey the rules of any other world. And then there is the genuine fourth world, the outsiders, those who are in the mess, who are not going to develop in the near future. There may be other groups, as I say, but I'm saying to you, my friends, that in my view, it is a misunderstanding that the whole world can be governed by one set of economic dimensions and economic rules. In the same way that we in Europe have experienced a very different form of capitalism to that of the United States, there are quite different models of development and of capitalism. The capitalism of the West, of Western Europe, has always been subject to the fear that the communist East would take us over. And that meant that the extreme exploitation of labor and the obscene conditions that exist in certain other parts of the world where capitalism has flourished has not happened in Europe. The United States, on the other hand, capitalism has evolved into something very specific, the kingdom of the multinationals. And they've started to dictate to us. They've been going on, and they're increasing and becoming more powerful. Now, I'm not saying multinationals in this room and outside are evil. No, but their priorities are not the priorities of all of us. Let me give you one example. There is Ebola now. I was surprised when I came through the airport to see notices about Ebola. Ebola in Chile. Surely you must be at least 200 million miles or kilometers away from Guinea, Sierra Leone, and so on. No, it is a worldwide epidemic. Why is it not already known how to combat Ebola? Because, and it isn't me, it is Margaret Chang, the Director General of the WHO, that said there is no money to be made, and therefore no vaccine against Ebola has been developed. So I start from that, my friends, that there are other priorities, and that perhaps we are so attracted that the temptation and the attraction, the magnetic attractions of the multinational is such that we only can see that world. And I'm appealing to you, young, clever, investigative people from a country which is not in one of the other groups that I've mentioned, because you're lucky, you've got natural resources, and you've also been, in political terms, to the brink, and you've come back. You know, for someone like me in Britain, and I wasn't the only one, seeing the debate between two women candidates for the presidency of Chile, two women whose families or backgrounds were in total contrast one with the other, solving it peacefully through elections. What a lesson. What a lesson. And it's only liberal democracy that can provide that. And it seems to me that that is a very important lesson that you all could teach us in other parts of the world. The issues that confront our world are enormous. I don't have to repeat them all in detail because you know them. You're scientists. You are at the coalface, at the front of the challenges. Global climate change. Who is suffering the most? The poorest. The countries where I work primarily, in sub-Saharan Africa, are already affected. The seasons have changed. Farmers don't know when to farm because the water comes down at different times of the year, in different amounts. The land that they have is much less productive because it has dried and it has become saline because evaporation has extracted all the water and what remains is not productive. We have population explosion. The UN said not very long ago, and it was in the Lancet, and if I look for my reference, I will never find it, but it did say that there is a myth about us stabilizing the population of the globe around the end of this century at about 11.5 million people. It will not happen because we don't know how to control it. Globalization leads to inequality. It is something that you know as well as we. The local paper, El Mercurio, covered that issue in great detail about the fights that your government is starting to prevent the most exploitative situation for the poorest. So perhaps globalization isn't a solution to all our evils. Many of you are in computing sciences. Well, you know that the computer sciences have also led to fewer jobs because inevitably more of the simplest jobs can be computerized, can be automated. So what is the result? Are we creating, through the benefit to us, small minorities, a permanent state of poverty to those who are not lucky enough to have our education and our backgrounds? Traditionally, all of us have seen a balance between us as individuals, the state representing us, the nation, the authorities, and the corporate world. Globalization and the increasing power of the multinationals, driven by their own very powerful engines, has destroyed that balance. And the result is that there's been a phenomenal weakening of national state structures, which is as bad in the rich countries, if not worse, than it is in the poor countries. Look at the United States, for example. Apparently, according to the US Treasury, more than $2 trillion of profits belonging to American corporations are hidden outside the United States. But it is out of that money that taxation is raised, which is enabling public education, public health, public buildings of roads and railways, and all of those issues that are not part of the consumer world. We can't have a world in which if you are not a consumer, you don't belong to society. What kind of society is that? We have other issues. We have, for example, the growing scarcity of basic resources, and I don't just mean copper or coltan, but I mean water and food, for all kind of economic exploitation of those resources, not necessarily for the benefit of individuals. We have migration on a gigantic scale. You know this across the whole of Latin America just as much as we know it in Europe. And what is the response of Europe? The response of Europe is a disgrace. We have withdrawn maritime patrols across the Mediterranean because the protection of the navies of Southern Europe would have encouraged people to cross the Mediterranean. So we have withdrawn them. And already 4,000 people that we know have drowned in the Mediterranean this year. It is a disgrace. And I hope that similarly, what is the trafficking of human beings across the whole of Latin America to escape appalling situations in your continent towards going to the United States, where they may risk to be forever third-class citizens, is something that can be addressed. Now, sorry to bring you such enormous, boring things, but that is the reality as I see it, because I have been very, very privileged over a number of years to work among the poorest. I spent a year in Ethiopia. There were 42 groups that I was responsible for. The largest single number of people were groups who suffered from leprosy. Now, why is there no cure for leprosy? Why is there no cure for malaria, really, yet? You don't have malaria in Chile, but you're going to have it. I'm sorry, you're going to have it. Global climate warming is guaranteed to bring it to you if you want to hear it. Okay, is there any other answer to any of the other medicines? Dengue fever, 17 were identified by Margaret Chan, the president of the WHO, which have no answers. Marburg's disease. Okay, so what is my challenge to you? I was told that I've only got 3 hours before you have lunch, and so I want to come to perhaps some challenges to you. Because you are young and capable and curious. Don't look just at the mirage of the top. Don't have your heads literally into astronomy only. Look, please, into what mankind needs. A Greek philosopher said many years ago, probably even before I was born, Pantos anthropos metron esti. Man is the measure of everything. Bring back your researches, your studies, your devotion to issues that affect all of us. Okay. Right, here's a long list, right? Plenty to satisfy everybody in this room. Plenty to satisfy everybody outside. Start thinking about long-term. Politicians cannot think long-term. They've got to be re-elected, the poor bastards. Multinational corporation chief executives don't deliver good returns next year. They will be out of a job. We are geared to short-term thinking. You, scientists, can be long-term thinkers. Please, please, look at 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. Look at the realistic options of everyday life. Food. We are heading for a massive global famines, my friend. Massive, massive, massive. We don't know how many people die of starvation every day. UNICEF puts it at 30,000 people per day, 10 million a year. There are every day at the moment something like 32,000 people displaced by conflict every single day of the year, according to the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. 7.7 square miles of agricultural land is lost every day, and so on and so forth. Those of you who are interested, I can certainly let the organizer have some of the data fully referenced, if I may say, so that you can follow them up and check on them. Water, there isn't enough, not even in Chile, I understand, for all the needs of your country. Where is it going to come from? Are you going to have the funds to build desalinization plants? The Arabs can't do it. Saudi Arabia has forbidden the use of water for agriculture. So what does it do? It buys land in Africa and Asia to grow its food for it, because they do not have enough water for their need. Those of you, I was delighted in your history, brief history, that now you admit social scientists. You have not mentioned economists. Please, could economists join as well? Yes. Oh, they've joined. Good. I'm glad about that, because you talked about sociologists and other ologists of one type or another, but you didn't mean economists. Quite rightly, too. Who would want to be an economist? You remember President Truman said, please send me a one-armed economist. All economists say, on one hand, but on the other. Okay, so now that the economists are also members of Encuentros, please look at new ways of measuring world behavior, world success. You know, the gross domestic product of a country goes up the more cars crash, the more operations in hospitals are carried out. What kind of development is that, my friend? I'll tell you what kind of development. The World Bank has a fantastic website. According to the Washington Post, who did a study of them, 31% of the reports of the World Bank have never been downloaded. Not once. Now, if I had any family, if I had any friends, if I had any neighbors, I would torture them, you sir, you madam, to download some blooming report so that you read it. No, the World Bank, 31% have never been opened, never been read. The World Bank doesn't have any family, any friends, any neighbors. We always suspected that, but I'm afraid the Washington Post has proven it to us. We need to give more power to the international institutions. At the moment, they are extremely weak and they are not transparent. Here is Chile that could lead and encourage transparency, because I see again from the local paper that the government is held to account. How can the United Nations, in New York, the budget of the United Nations per annum is less than the budget of the fire and police department of the city of New York. This is the United Nations, less than the fire and police department of the city of New York. What precedence, what relevance are we giving to international institutions? We need the development of more social structures, more localized rights for individuals. The net has enabled us to be so contacted, so easily linked one with the other. It has enabled the tragedy of the 43 students in Mexico executed probably by the authorities, by the federal police, to become something that we all know about and that we all care about. And the government of Mexico is now forced to take action. But it is also the same network that is allowing the Islamic State to flourish. So let us be careful. The problem with the net, which is fantastic, the problem with Google, the problem with Yahoo, and so on, is that there is no morality. And only what is extreme comes out. Scandals, accidents with dresses for pretty starlets. Those are the ones that make Instagram. Now, I wish that one could control those. Probably one can't. You who study medical subjects may well have a full agenda which will enable you to spend more time on the diseases that are going to develop around the world, and some of which you probably have more direct experience. More biodiversity allow us to have a place, yes, but not the only place that we believe to be entitled to in the whole of the universe. Jobs. Now, again, local newspapers, talking to some of you outside this room in the last 2 or 3 days, the problem that you have ahead, those of you who have graduated, and some of the not most prestigious universities, is jobs. What are you going to do with a fantastic degree from some university which sold you the idea of a degree but cannot deliver a degree that is acceptable into the international community? So are we allowing little odd universities simply because they've got a very high marketing budget to come in and vitiate what we call true scholarship through ability? No, no. Let us reintroduce some kind of morality, and let us reintroduce also an acceptance that if we want to create jobs for everybody, it will have to be local jobs. It will have to be the recreation of interest in local issues, in local plants, in local agriculture, in local building. Because if we address those issues, then we won't have, perhaps, the phenomenon of the barrios, everybody escaping the rural areas and trying to find a very well-paid job in the city. Let us use the definition of job creation as a much wider one than the one that is used now, which is a big, well-paid job in an international corporation. No. It's fantastic to know that Pfizer is creating a new center for research here. Fantastic. Right, okay, let us look at the local diseases. Let us look at the way that certain types of foxes are disappearing in this country, and so on, because that preserves the biodiversity. Right? The last points I want to make is that there has been, in the last 20 years or so, to me, an indication that the countries outside the magic circle of the OECD can come out with ideas that we can all learn from. In your country, you have a woman president. It's the second time. Now, women bring a different dimension to politics than men. Mrs. Lagarde, she the big boss of the IMF, and Hillary Clinton, the next president probably of the USA, apparently always hold meetings when they visit any country with women. Because women speak differently to men. They have different priorities. They don't want weapons. They want kids to be brought up in a proper way. Now, perhaps an increasing feminization of politics and economics and science will lead us to change the priorities. Bangladesh, in the last 20, 30 years, has brought microfinance. Not the world of finance that we know in the West that has bankrupted us. made the bankers very rich, thank you very much, but bankrupted most of us because the financial systems have wiped out the savings. Microfinance, the system of lending $5, $10, $15 to a farmer to buy better quality seeds, better quality tools. That is what has been reinvented from Bangladesh. There are now 3,000 microfinance institutions in the world. Mobile banking. Probably lots of you, when you've got a problem with your bank or whatever, you can check on the telephone. It was Kenya. Where the hell is Kenya? Somewhere in Africa. That introduced the idea, M-Pesa. M-Pesa. Pesa means money in Swahili. And the idea of banking accounts came from Kenya. And then the telephone companies, mobile telephone companies across the world decided, what a jolly good idea. We are going to copy the Kenyans. Not that anybody would credit, of course, the Kenyans. They're too poor, illiterate, and far away to have any rights whatsoever. Brazil has introduced the Bolsa Familia. Now, I don't know if you know about it, but since some of you may not know, it is a very simple system under which credits in the form of coupons are given to families where they know, with the local authority or government of one form or another, knows that they will never be able to earn enough to survive. Families headed by elderly people, families headed by children, families whose breadwinner is no longer able to work. They've been identified. They're given credits. And those credits have got to be spent locally on local food, on local medicines, or rather from medicines in the local shop, from building companies in the local area, and so on condition that everybody is educated, the women more than the men, or as much as the men, that they get their injections as they should, and so on and so forth. A number of very simple requirements which makes everybody able to access the necessities of life. That was introduced by Brazil about 15 years ago, other nations across the world, and some of the voluntary organizations, the NGOs, are copying it elsewhere. I came across a fantastic project. This is yet again a different solution that I've come across in the South. In Uganda, if you are poor as anything, and you have a problem because your husband comes home drunk, beats you up, and you don't know what to do because the local police doesn't care, you can pick up a mobile telephone and speak in your minority language, and you have 24/7, in 7 different local languages, access to a lawyer. Now that is justice to me. You don't have to go through some expensive lawyer. Lawyers and bankers always do very well, thank you very much. These are bankers who volunteer, they're bankers, a banker volunteering to lend you money. I'm sorry, I was being, these are local lawyers who know the local legislation and will say, you have the following rights. And if the woman wants to go to the police and the police refuses, she will report that police officer. Now that will scare them stiff. That kind of service. Some of you might even remember the barefoot doctor of China. It was killed by the medical professionalism of the North and the West because we descend on the third world with our priorities. And the chairman very kindly introduced me as being one of those in the organization that got the Nobel Peace Prize, Doctors Against Nuclear Weapons. I'm not a doctor, you see, which is why I was chosen, but I also I let go, I think is the expression. But when a cardiologist says, your problem is heart, and when a skin specialist comes and says, your problem is skin, and when something else, a pedologist comes and tells, your problem is your foot, right? Now, we believe them, don't we? But for most people in the world, that is not relevant. The problem is prevention. It's not that I don't want you to sell your medicine, sir. You deserve to sell many more medicines, but to those who can afford to do it. What we need is more prevention and less cure. So these, my friends, are some of the challenges that I present to you from someone from outside the structures. Outside, I probably have sold my soul many years ago, I can't remember how long ago, to the big multinational corporations. I hope I've redeemed myself a bit and put you some challenges. Thank you for listening.
Fantastic, Benny. Thought-provoking and challenging. So we would like to open the discussion with the audience. Vamos a tener 2 micrófonos y pueden preguntar en español y nosotros traducir y él puede responder en inglés o pueden preguntar en inglés si es que quieren. Ahí Manuel va a tomar un micrófono y quizás Paulina, ¿puedes pasar tú el otro micrófono? Ya. ¿Quién quiere hacer la primera pregunta? ¿Hay alguien que se entusiasma? No es problema si la hacen en español o en inglés. Acá adelante. Presenta de quién eres y luego la pregunta, por favor.
Voy a preguntar en español para que me ayude a que se entienda bien. Bueno, soy Juan Francisco Godocedo, trabajo en la Universidad Católica actualmente como postdoctorado. Bueno, y la pregunta que quería hacer es, como señaló el profesor, ha leído de los diarios en Chile y probablemente sepa algo de las reformas que se están haciendo en Chile. Y hay una gran discusión a nivel de la política y esta discusión tiene que ver con cuál es el mejor sistema educacional en Chile. Y el sistema educacional ha sido financiado privadamente mucho tiempo y ahora se está proponiendo que tenga un rol más estatal. Y cuando la población o la gente escucha esto, en general se hace su idea dependiendo del color político que tiene, pero también escucha y recibe críticas, por ejemplo, de journals como The Economist, que dice que Chile está frenando el ritmo económico, pero después escucha a una gran autoridad de una organización internacional que dice que van por el buen rumbo. ¿Cuál es su opinión como economista respecto a las reformas que se están generando aquí en Chile y la discusión?
Did you get it? No. Well, maybe I will hyper summarize it. We are discussing now, we go into a public only education system, meaning that we don't pay for it, the state pays for it, or a combination that it's been the case in different degrees. Some of our schools are paid privately 100%, others are partially paid by the parents and the state. What's your view on education as a right?
Oh, education is a fundamental right. There is no doubt at all in my book. And if you have read any of the books by Amartya Sen, you will see that he takes that as an absolute right that we all have. Now, basic education up to secondary school seems to me to be an obligation of the state because we all have the right. After that, in my scheme of things, there has got to be careful control over the quality of education. This morning I was talking to someone in the hotel who is going to speak as well here, who was telling me how California's university system works, with a variety of campuses, a variety of universities, and with the professional body, the professorial body, checking on one another's capacity and peer ability. Now that has got to be the way of any institution. But you see, I don't know what the situation is in Chile, but I've seen in Nairobi, there are 80 universities. How many are good? 4, 5 perhaps? But all of them have got a good marketing budget. So if I came with a better marketing budget, I would set up the best university that there is. Rubbish. And you wouldn't fall for it. But if your father and your mother are illiterate, and here is the offer of a degree, of course you would go that way. So here it seems to me are part of the obligations of the state. And this is where the private sector on its own cannot function. It cannot function. And it succeeds internationally and globally because there are no limits. Global institutions cannot cope.
Thank you, Benny. ¿Otra pregunta? Diego. Paulina, si quieres aquí. ¿Tú estabas con una persona atrás? ¿Tú querías preguntar? No. Ya. Dale, Diego. No hay problema. Aquí. Puedes hacerla en inglés si quieres. O en español.
Benny, thank you very much for your enlightening words. My name is Diego Velasco. I'm a civil servant from Chile's Foreign Service. A few years in the East, in the Far East, as they call. I think I just would like to reflect on what you said more than a question. Is what these young generations have in store for the future. I do agree entirely that there's no one market or there's one global system that could rule them all. It all depends on the cultures and where they developed. And this is one thing that we can share when we come from abroad with ideas from abroad. And the minister said today, bring those ideas into Chile. Don't come here with a stamp that says, I have another, I'm a graduate, I'm a PhD or whatever. No. Don't think that you're going to get a job. Bring the job here. Bring those ideas. And as you are from all areas of society, and this is a concept that I've seen in Melbourne, the Committee for Melbourne was a corporation, a think tank, non-alienated in short term, but in long term. 30 years abroad said, where is Melbourne going to? Melbourne is going down, Melbourne is no employment. What do we do? And from all sectors, they put a blueprint at the long term, 20, 30 years ahead. And nobody can say, no, we want to be there. We want to solve these problems, these, bottlenecks in transit and so on. And they put up what today is the first city on the world for 5 years in a row. And that is a civil society. And that is an incredible sample that shows what you've done. Thank you very much.
And the minister also said something which I thought was extremely to the point. Vision integral. My goodness, do we need that?
¿Otra consulta, comentario? Adelante, preséntate, por favor.
Hello, Benny. It was very enlightening to hear you, and I am here from Becpas, from University of Melbourne, but I'm actually Chilean. I work at university here in Temuco, in the south of Chile, and I've been devoted to academy and studying for many years, and I would like to follow on a postgraduate study on philosophy. And my question for you is actually more correlated to all these dynamics of having philosophical conversations and making some kind of epistemic philosophical progress. And my question is, could it be an answer to introduce in elementary schools or elementary and secondary schools topic-related conversations and quantify or qualify somehow the nature of this conversation through epistemic philosophical progress and have that as a solution for better reflection in children and then adults and then not having so many wars and, this evolution?
Thank you.
Oh my goodness. We've got a long time, haven't we?
Try to answer briefly so we can have more questions.
You see, it seems to me that I'm the father of 3 children, and competition is such a powerful human condition that it has got to be tamed, because that is what, at a bigger level, leads all of us in different directions, from amity to enmity. And you are asking us to teach children to live in harmony with one another, and adults to understand harmony. I'm not quite sure that it is something that one can learn except through life. And yes, I would like to see philosophy very much part of every higher education curriculum. But I'm not sure that apart from the history of philosophy, you can teach it or you could introduce it at the low level. History of ideas, yes. Histories of philosophical ideas, yes. Philosophy itself, I think one needs to have experienced a bit of life.
Thank you, Benny. No. Lo perdimos. Ahí. ¿Otra pregunta? Atrás, Álvaro.
Hi, I'm a scientist, immunologist, and as scientists, sometimes we think that a way to overcome poverty is to develop some transgenic foods. So I would like to know about your opinion about the transgenic food or modified.
When you say modified, I'm totally in agreement. Farmers have done that always. They've always mixed the best seeds with the best seeds. They have linked one tree, a branch of a tree to a branch of another tree. No problem at all. When we're talking about transgenic, we are entering into a very different area of discussion. And it seems to me that whilst GM food, certain types, for example, better quality maize seeds, have now been proven to be okay. That personally, I'm not bothered to eat it or not to eat it. But it's all, like many other things, part of a system. Why you can't introduce GM-modified seeds in a society which is too poor to have the fertilizers and the pesticides that are needed to control those GM-transformed seeds. And one of the problems in most of the poorest societies where I've worked is exactly that. You persuade a farmer that that seed is going to be better for her. It's bound to be a woman in Africa because the man has gone somewhere to look for work. You persuade her that this is a miracle cure. It isn't. It's part of a system in which you need better quality fertilizer, improvements in the soil, better education, certain consistency in water, and so on. So we are back to number one priority, education. Since the 1950s, the World Bank has known that even with 3 years of the most basic education, a woman would become a better farmer. But education for all is one of the Millennium Development Goals that will never be achieved so long as it is the elites of the South that negotiate what policies of education there will be. I hope I'm not avoided your question. It is a different system, and selecting bits of it and saying, oh, that is appropriate, isn't the solution. It's got to be seen in a sort of cohesive and linked up system. And joined up thinking is not something that we are good at.
Thank you, Benny. Another question? We're getting excited here. Jorge, introduce yourself.
Él estaba antes. Gracias. Thank you a lot for your talk, Benny. I would like to join 3 concepts that you develop on your talk and finally ask you for an advice. First, the classification of the 4 different words that you talk about at the beginning. Second, when you encourage us to the long-term thinking, that for me is quite related to think more than as an individual or than as a small group, as a species, that we are being part of a more complex equilibrium in connection with other species in this world. And finally, the power that you talk about that hold the multinationals that are pushing people to think in short term. We may take a look in the last 20 or 30 years and everything is about do it now, just do it and blah, blah, blah. So all this is quite inserted in the general thinking of people, even among young people. And there are new, different solutions. For me, one of the best is local economies and the development of local economies. But what can we do? Here is where I ask for the advice. What can we do more specifically to encourage more people like us and go against the current? Because doing that by now is, in a country like Chile, is literally going against the current, going against the flow. Which will be your advice for this matter?
Next time, if I'm able to answer that question, I will become a saint. Thank you for the invitation. Is it me? I'm sorry. Okay, long term. Science has always had to think long term. And this is the attraction, it seems to me, of science. And perhaps we need more scientists to become statesmen. Does anybody happen to know how many people in the present government have got science degrees?
Probably 0.
Yeah, okay. Well, then you have...
Science degrees? Like biochemist or physicist? How many? Like 10%? Maybe? Okay, impressive.
0, 10%, any other offers? Well, you know, whatever, even if it is as many as 10%, which would surprise me, in the United States cabinet, there isn't a single scientist. And that may well be part of the short-termism of that society and of all of our societies. Here is a challenge to you. You become a politician after you got your PhD, all right? Sorry, I'm not inviting you, I'm suggesting, right, the lady is agreeing with me and she's going to sponsor your candidacy. The 4 different worlds. Now, I'm not exactly sure which bit of that you would challenge. I'm talking about currents of needs. You see, in the southern part, in the parts of the world where I am sort of most familiar with, we have some absurdities which cannot be reconciled. Ethiopia has been encouraged by the international institutions and coffee producers to export more coffee. Right. Now, 20 years ago, the biggest producer of coffee in the world was Brazil. Now, and the second producer was Ethiopia. Now, the biggest producer is still Brazil. Can you guess which is the second biggest producer in the world? Vietnam. Vietnam? That's far away, because the soil of Vietnam was discovered by the World Bank and USAID and coffee companies as being very fertile for growing coffee. So in my book, which is, I agree, my book, you know, should be banned from public libraries. In my book, more people producing coffee means better quality coffee for me and worse quality of life for the coffee producers. So not export-led growth, that's rubbish. It's local demand. Back to you, what you're saying about local economies. Now, the power of the multinational corporations. You see, it seems to me that what multinational corporations do is an indication of what can be done if you have got clear objectives and you go for them. The success of Pfizer or the success of General Motors is because they sell the blooming machines and they know the marketing and they use clever marketing. Now tell me why in every village in Africa, I don't know, perhaps in every village in the Andes, you will find a bottle of Coca-Cola, but you will not find a small pack of fertilizers, right? If you can solve that conundrum, you will have solved some of the great marketing challenges that the poor world faces. And the great thing is that the multinationals will love you for it, but they can't do it either And this is why we get with Coca-Cola everywhere in Africa, but no fertilizers everywhere in Africa.
Otra pregunta. El que levantó la mano aquí. Preséntate, por favor. A ver.
Sí.
¿Ahora sí?
Ah, yeah.
Dale.
Thank you. My name is Sebastian. I'm an engineering student here in Universidad Católica. You touched two concepts in your speech, justice and climate change. And just a couple of days ago, the Conference of Parties in Lima just ended. They enforced the idea of common but different responsibilities of countries. And I would like to ask you about, from the perspective of Chile, a developing country, what should we do, having in mind that on the one hand, climate change is a pressing issue, but on the other hand, Chile has already approved carbon taxes. We have the industry is forced to comply with a percentage of renewable energy, but we also have the electricity cost, it doubles the costs of the other countries in Latin America. So I would like to comment about this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Your question is so specific that in a way I can't answer it. I'm sorry, because I don't know Chile's priorities and Chile's resources. But you've got a lot of sun, I understand, particularly in the north. You've got a huge desert full of sun. We've got some of the most advanced astronomical research in the world carried out because you've got clear skies and so on. Now, what percentage of subsidy from governmental sources do the solar energy industries receive from your government? I have no idea. What I can tell you is that globally, the World Bank reckons that $640 billion annually goes into subsidy to fossil fuels. Now, that's a lot of money. You could have a big party with that. So the fossil fuels, or all debates about fuels have got to be held within certain economic constraints. And if we falsify those, as the debate on fossil fuels already is, well, of course the solar energy is hopelessly unviable. But when the German government, after Fukushima is an American writer, I'm sorry, Fukushima, decided that it will no longer invest in nuclear energy, suddenly the alternative energy outlook changed drastically. Now, does that apply to Chile? I suspect that a lot of that does apply to Chile. But this is perhaps something to ask, or the gentleman from Antofagasta has left. So perhaps one should ask him, why are they not investing? But I'll tell you that the Chinese companies that have been extremely successful on a range of solar energy industries and new methods of providing cheap panels has been taken to court, to the WTO, the WTO court by American corporations for unfairly subsidies. I'm sorry, I don't buy that. I don't buy that. If the priority is to reduce global warming, let us subsidize whoever has got to be subsidized, and so be it. Take me to court.
Good. Another question? ¿Otra pregunta? Ya. Ella que está ahí.
Well, hello. Thank you very much for your words. I would like to ask you some questions about the topics you have been visiting, climate change and the increasingly intertwined topics that seems to revolve around this more broad topic. I am Matias Tapia. I am a student of the University of Chile. I am an engineer student. And I started doing my undergraduate thesis in the topic of energy. And then I discovered that energy was also linked with food and with water and with forests and biodiversity and the climate and so many other topics that are in their own merits a world of knowledge and a world of politics. And I discovered also that culture and economy were also involved. So I would like to ask you your opinion about how can we, for example, as engineers, as scientists, or as students, cope with the challenge of responsibly preparing ourselves to address these issues that are so broadly intertwined with every other issue around, but we have so much limited time, and the closing window of time to address these issues are also pressing us to prepare us further, but I think I'm a little overwhelmed. Thank you.
That is the ultimate question. How can mankind survive, right? That is the ultimate question. My answer is, I wouldn't start from here. Sorry if it sounds stupid. The solution isn't in our hands because we are not one world of decision making, a hierarchical situation where at the conference of the parties, this is decided and everybody will. No. The solution may well be, I don't know enough, but again, if I knew, I would be, beatified straight away. But there is a very, very clever Peruvian economist called Hernando de Soto. Now, he has written a fabulous book. I think it's fabulous. We economists are such awful people, really boring. We reading interesting books on economics late at night. Oh, good God, I wouldn't want my daughter to marry one of them. Anyhow, his book is Why Does Capitalism Succeed in the North and Fails Everywhere Else? Now, he says, if you made the peasant, the farmer, the poorest citizens of our societies owners of their bit of land with rights over it, over their house, over their shacks, over their tools, you would give them immediately capital. Now, I am a capitalist in the sense that I don't believe that Karl Marx, was right. The state has no right to decide how I will live my life. But I want a liberal capitalist societies to survive and entitling everybody to have their own capital. Hernando de Soto calls it dead capital, which he estimates at about $3 trillion, I think. But if we did, Latin America, Chile introduced Reforma Agraria. That has not been done in most countries of the South. So if you're rich and powerful, from a high Indian caste, or from a family related to the king of some obscure clan in Africa, you have more power than the poor at the bottom of the earth. They are not going to survive, you're going to survive. So give people their basic rights, give them their basic tools, which includes capitalism to me, give them the capacity to organize themselves into social groups, and then we will have the beginning of a new change according to different cultures, because there isn't any longer, or there may never have been, perhaps there never have been, a dominant culture. Let diversity live.
Great. We have 2 minutes left, and I would like to ask the final question, which is essentially, I would like you, if you kindly dare, to share something that you regret not having done in your life, and
I thought you said 2 minutes.
and if there is one concept that you would like to share with us, what would it be? So it's a reflection on a regret and one word, ideally.
what I would like to say, remain true to yourself. And I did not realize for many, many years what my priorities were. I became a father very late in life, and I realized that my children were the priority. And I realized that it was the little things of life, the flowers and the insects and clean water that matter. And if I had been able to understand and to see that at an earlier stage, my life would have been different. And I would urge you to find the ways to remain engaged at a personal level with the issues that confront us. Not speak through big corporations, not through systems, but to yourself. And if you cannot survive the system in which you are, accept that you will be an outsider. I've had to accept that many years ago. I caught my boss with his hand on the tills. It was an international organization. I reported him, and I was fired. Okay, but my conscience is clear. So I regret that I did not discover my capacity to deal with the humiliation of not having any big position in the world, but meeting people like you who understand and invite me to challenge them. That is where I would end.
Thank you, Benny.
Thank you.